There are 6 common mistakes that I see students make over and over and over again when simplifying expression using the order of operations. So in this video, I'm going to go over all 6 common mistakes, but I'm going to break them down in isolation because a lot of times when we're working through a complicated problem, it gets lost or we get confused or we forget the algorithm and we make these common mistakes. And I don't want you to do that. So I want to make sure you can identify exactly these types of mistakes so you do not do them on your own. So the first common mistake that happens over and over again is going to be always using addition before subtraction. It doesn't matter what acronym you are using, PEMDAS, BODMAS, GEMDAS, they always end with an AS. Now again, if your teacher is teaching it correctly or you are understanding it correctly, addition and subtraction are going to be equivalent, right? Not one is before the other. However, the way that we work or the way that we determine which one comes first is always going to be from a left to right system. So you can see in this example, we have addition and subtraction, but going from left to right, it's going to be subtraction before addition. So the correct way to do this problem would be simply subtract 20 minus 5, and that's going to give us a 15. And then I can add the 4, which is simply going to give me an answer of 19. The incorrect method that students will do is they'll say, oh, addition, subtraction, PEMDAS, GEMDAS, BODMAS, whatever. And they'll simply do 20 minus a 9. They add the 5 and the 4 first, and therefore they get an 11, which again is going to be the incorrect solution. So do not do it. Just be aware of it. Always look out for it. Double check that you are not making that same mistake. Now, the next one is basically the exact same thing, but with multiplication and division. Again, multiplication and division are equal in terms of what we do that are equal, which one goes first. It all depends, again, on it from a left to right system. So for PEMDAS, a lot of students will get confused on this, right? Because the M, multiplication, comes before addition. That's why I like BODMAS, because BODMAS kind of flips that around. So it's just a quick little check. Oh yeah, D is before M. Just make sure it's not always D before M, but it's that it's not in that order. So we just need to make sure it's always goes from left to right. So again, in this example, 20 divided by 5 is simply going to be a 4. And then we multiply that by 4, which is going to give us a 16. And you can see if you make the mistake, you do multiplication before division, you'll get a 20 divided by 20, which is equal to 1. And you can see, guys, these answers are not the same, right? So it's very important to make sure we are following the order of operations correctly. Now, the next example is one that usually students, it's not because they don't understand the acronym or they make mistakes. It's because they're doing too many things at one time or trying to maybe work too fast and they just overlook it. So in this example, we have a 2 times 3 squared. Now, again, just a lot of students will just see, hey, 2 times 3, I know 2 times 3, and they get happy. Hey, I know 2 times 3, I can do that, right? So what they do is they multiply the 2 times 3 before squaring it. So it's going to be 2 times 3, which would be a 6 squared, which equals a 36. But if you follow any of the acronyms, BODMAS, PEMDAS, GEMDAS, right? Doesn't matter if we're talking about exponents or orders or indices. Either one, we always need, this is the number 2 rule, right? Outside of parentheses, grouping, brackets, the next step is always to look for powers. So this should be your second thing you're looking for after parentheses or the grouping symbols is going to be squaring, right? You have to follow this operation next or the second, right at the beginning. So always do your squaring before multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, right? And I think that's kind of like a golden rule that I like to think about. We think about multiplication, division, addition, subtraction kind of grouped together because they follow that left to right formula. Make sure before you start doing those, you've eliminated all of your powers, all of your exponents, your indices, your orders. So the correct way to do this would be 3 squared, which is a 9. So it'd be 2 times 9. And that is equal to an 18. You can see, again, these answers are not going to be the same, so it's very important. Now, the next one is definitely one where students, if they don't understand their acronym, or maybe they're not getting their instruction, they can make some mistakes. And this one actually is at fault for the acronyms, I think. Like for BODMAS or PEMDAS, they always talk about grouping symbols in the terms of brackets or parentheses. And it gets confusing because if you think about a fraction, like if I think about, 2 divided by 3, that's the same thing as a fraction, or thinking of the fraction 2/3, that's the same thing as 2 divided by 3. So we can equivalate a fraction as division. And why would that become a problem? Well, you can see here, I have division. I would apply that division before I would do that subtraction. And then do I do the division before the subtraction? Do I do the division before the multiplication? Do I do the multiplication first before the division? It kind of gets confusing because there's no left or right system. So if students get confused, sometimes they just make their best guess and say, well, you know what, maybe I'm going to divide. And maybe what I'll do is I'll divide the 4 and the 4, which gives me 1. That's not too bad. And I'll take the 5 and divide that by a -1, and that will give me a -5. And then that will give me an answer of -4, which, I don't know, at least gives me an okay answer. I can work with that. So that's kind of the downfall with PEMDAS and BODMAS, is the grouping symbols only talk about brackets and parentheses. One of the reasons why I like GEMDAS is because it talks about G as grouping symbols to not only include brackets, parentheses, but also fractions. And what that means is when we have a fraction and we have expressions in the numerator and denominator, we need to simplify those first. So you can see up here, I have a product, like I have two group, like this fraction has grouped a numerator and a denominator. What GEMDAS will tell us is I need to simplify this grouping symbols, the numerator and the denominator, before I do any other operations. So what I have here is a 4 times 5, which is going to be a 20, and a 4 minus 1, which is going to be a 3. Now again, it can be confusing because you're like, 20 divided by 3 doesn't simplify to a nice number, but that's fine, right? It's still just a rational number, but it's definitely not the same as -4, which is the incorrect answer as well. All right, let's get to another one, which again, a lot of students, just like a lapse of judgment or a lapse of like kind of thinking, will make this problem. I don't know why I'm adding, I'm doing a comma, it's not coordinate points. But this one will be like 11 minus 2 times 3 plus 4. And again, just like in my previous example where we did the exponent, you multiply the 2 and the 3 before squaring them. A lot of times we'll see this problem and students are like, oh, I can do a -2 and a 3. They're right next to each other. Or what they'll think is multiplication before addition and subtraction, right? So then they say, oh, well, then the obvious thing to do is to multiply the -2 and the 3 because that comes before subtraction and addition. Or I just see these two numbers. I think it's an easy product to do. And so let's go and multiply them. So -2 times 3 is going to be a -6 plus 4. And that's going to give me a 5 plus 4, so that equals a 9. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is incorrect. Because remember, right, PEMDAS, parentheses, we always have to do that first. You know, doesn't matter brackets, same as parentheses or grouping symbols. They're the parentheses. We have to do that first. Always, whenever you see grouping symbols, do that first. So what we need to do here, the correct answer is 11 minus 2, which is a 9, and then times a 3 plus 4, which is going to be a 7. And you can see that answer is going to be 63. So you're definitely not going to get the same answer. So you got to make sure you are careful. All right. And the last example, which is again, a very, very common one, ladies and gentlemen. And this happens to not only students that are first learning the order of operations, this happens to students that are doing advanced math that have way past order of operations. It's just a common thing that happens over and over again. Okay. So this one's really, really important. So maybe a student feels comfortable. They're like, all right, I got this. I know I do the inside parentheses first, right? We have two grouping symbols, two sets of parentheses, maybe bracket and parentheses, doesn't really matter. I always know I have to do the innermost operation first, right? But then once I do 2 plus 2 and 4, you're thinking in your head, oh, I'm going to have a 4, and then I'm going to have a minus subtraction and then another subtraction. I don't need parentheses anymore. So what they'll do is they'll say, I'm just going to simplify this to 1 minus 6 minus 4, because there's no more need for parentheses, right? I mean, I just have subtraction going on. I simplified this and done. I'll just drop my parentheses. And then working from left to right, 1 minus 6 is going to be a -5. You owe me $5. You borrow 4 more. You're now going to get a -9. Okay. So there's that answer. But what is the problem? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we can only get rid of the parentheses once we've simplified what's inside of those parentheses. So the correct way to approach this is if I have 2 plus 2, that's 4. I got that. But I cannot eliminate this. I can eliminate the parentheses around the 4, but I cannot eliminate the parentheses around the 6 minus 4 because I have not simplified that yet. Even though it's still subtraction and subtraction, right? You just can't eliminate it and just say the parentheses don't matter, because what this actually represents via distributive property is a -1 times 6 and a -1 times -4, right? So it's very important. The distinction actually matters. So if I wanted to do this properly, working step by step, I can eliminate this parentheses around the 6 minus 4 by just simply subtracting a 6 minus 4. When I do that, I get a 6 minus 4 is going to be 2. And you can see now that simplifies here to a -1. So you can see, ladies and gentlemen, these answers are not going to be the same. Now, these were simple mistakes covered in isolation. In the next video, I'm going to work through multiple examples of simplifying using the order of operations in more difficult expanded types of problems. So if you want to go and check out that video is coming up next. Or if you want to download my free practice worksheet that aligns with this video and the next video, then check it out in the description down below. Cheers.